Hey there folks, welcome to this video, and here I'm going to be giving a review for the Italian Grand Prix, round 14 of this season's F1 Championship, the 69th F1 race held at Monza, and wow, it was spectacular. Charles Leclerc's second win in a row, and his second win in F1, joining a list of people including Damon Hill and Lewis Hamilton, who got their first 2 wins in consecutive races. In this video, I'm going to be talking a bit about the race. Of course, I'll mention a bit about qualifying as well later on, with a couple of little bits of note, and hopefully not keeping you here for too long. So first off, let's talk about the race winner, Charles Leclerc. Qualifying on pole after yesterday's session, he was spectacular. Got a driving standards flag for that defensive move on Lewis Hamilton. He was told no moving under braking, which I personally think was unfair. It was harsh movement and he didn't give space on the outside, but it wasn't necessarily moving under braking. It was more that he was moving, the kind of zigzagging that he was doing, the bit that was argued as more dangerous, was still happening while he was accelerating or had his foot on the throttle. He wasn't necessarily braking there. But I understand why he got the driving standards flag. Personally, I'm happy to see that kind of thing being used, but again, I'll talk about that a bit more in a bit. Elsewhere, we saw Mercedes second and third, which, well, it's predictable, really. I would argue that Mercedes had the better car over the course of the weekend, but as we saw, whilst they were able to close the gap through the Curva Grande and all the way to Ascari, it was that run to Parabolica and the run to turn 1 where they were actually suffering, which was weird. Because Mercedes are usually seen as the ones with the dominant power unit. They're seen as the ones who are like the first ones to break 1,000 horsepower and so on. But this time it seems like Ferrari had the better straight line speed. If they were slipstreaming, you'd see that the Mercedes was just about able to stay level pace with the Ferrari. With the DRS, they were able to close it a couple of tenths. But as we saw, moreover with Hamilton, which was quite spectacular really, we saw moreover with Lewis that coming out of Parabolica, Leclerc was able to get away. He had more confidence in the car. Maybe it was the fact that they were using hard tyres. Ferrari, I don't know how to explain it. Ferrari have somehow got good strategy all of a sudden. I know it's a bit of a meme, but yeah, they made a bold choice by going on to the hards. Mind you, they had quite bad pace on the mediums over the course of practice, and managed to outdo the Mercedes, where they had somehow better pace than Lewis on fresh tyres, when Lewis was on mediums and Charles was on hards, and over Bottas later on when Lewis faltered. And again, it was mistakes for both the Mercedes drivers that essentially spelled an end to their challenges. Lewis having to go on at turn 1 and Bottas going deep into turn 1 and losing about a second in turn 2. And then if we look down the rest of the pack, 4th and 5th for Renault. Of course, for the Enstone team, they've had a lot of successes over the past few years, but for Renault in particular, in terms of the kind of form and in terms of the finishing place of both drivers, you could argue this has been their best finish since 2008, Japanese Grand Prix, which Alonso won. Also, coincidentally, the one after Crashgate race. But you have to commend them. They managed to outdo the Honda power. They managed to outdo Red Bull. And whilst that's through a variety of issues, some of which Red Bull's own doing and Honda's own doing, some of which not, they were able to deliver and not only be best of the rest, but better than the Red Bulls. Albon managed to bring home quite a good finish, especially given the kind of off he had battling with Carlos Sainz early in the race. And Verstappen had a decent recovery, despite starting in the back of the grid and having to do a lap 1 pit stop because of a collision. But I think most of you, if you're here to watch me talk about the big names, are here to see me talk about Sebastian Vettel. It's been quite early on in the race, whilst chasing Valtteri Bottas, going through Ascari and an unsafe re-entry which caused a collision for Lance Stroll. saw Vettel with a 10-second stop-go penalty and 3 points on his license, which means one more major incident before the US Grand Prix, where he loses 3 points because of the incident last season, and he gets a race ban. Now, of course, I don't think he would get a race ban. They're saying that could always be seen as the amateur commentator's curse. But it's a shame. That said, though, the penalty was completely deserved. Whether or not it's the fact that Seb couldn't see Stroll rejoining the track, it's just a racer's instinct. We see this, personally, speaking as a WRC fan, we see this a lot in that sport. When they spin, they're more likely to drive forward than try and engage reverse, which usually means more damage to the car in WRC. However, here it also meant causing an accident and an unsafe re-entry onto the track. And as for Lance Stroll, I think that he deserved the penalty he got as well. I know his team principal was saying, oh, it was too harsh. Maybe they could have just given him a 10-second time penalty. But he deserved a penalty because he still didn't have control when he rejoined the track, which caused Toro Rosso of Gasly to go off. But I don't know. I'm not going to be one of the people that's just piling on all the pressure for Seb. I think he was unfortunate given what happened in qualifying. But it was just another mistake, really. And I'm not going to do anything that's like constantly critical of him, but he has been making a lot of these. Elsewhere, another couple of points of note in the race. Sergio Perez's recovery from P18 to finish in P7. It's a wonderful job by him, actually. He did quite well to be able to do something like that, and especially after a turn 1 kind of incident that he had. Pitting under VSC, very clever strategy, and getting into a battle with Max Verstappen towards the end of the race. He held his own, and he did well from that. As did Lando Norris, who picked up 10th place and 1 point. Especially because he had to pick up the mantle after the unsafe release of Carlos Sainz, for which McLaren earned a €5,000 fine, where his front right tyre wasn't attached properly. And you got a feel for Sainz because he had quite a good race, including that scrap with Albon. And another retirement to talk about will be Daniel Kvyat's. Because for Kvyat, it's, I believe, the first Honda power unit failure in a race this season. Which is weird to think about because there have been Honda unit failures over the course of the season. Max Verstappen, for example, in qualifying. But it shows how Honda have managed to develop the engine. Of course, they've taken a large amount of grid penalties. Like in the last 2 races, how we've seen at least one Red Bull started from the back. But it's a good improvement. And at least they're able to get to the end of most of the races. Though, I thought that was a point of note. Because it's something that we're not really talking about anymore. It's interesting to think that we're not actually talking about Honda reliability issues in a race. But yeah, in regards to the penalties, I quite like the Michael Massey system now. The one of being able to employ driving standards flags. And I like the fact that there were reprimands given for qualifying yesterday. Where, well, it was a farce. The fact that only Sainz managed to get onto a second run of Q3, and this is following on from what happened at Spa, was a joke. That said, though, I understand why Carlos Sainz is saying things like we should do a super pole, but I don't think it's necessarily needed. Because the kinds of circuit in which you need it would be pretty much these two. It would pretty much just be Spa and Monza. Because in the other tracks, you're not really looking for a toe. Even though Shanghai and Baku arguably have the 2 longest straights on the calendar, they, they also have lots of tight corners. On trail, we don't talk about this kind of issue either. So, I get why they're critical of it, but I don't think something like a super pole system is going to solve it. And I do think that the reprimand should have been stricter, especially on people such as Stroll and Hulk. But I'm not going to say, well, it should have been harsh on everyone. because they all suffered as a result of them all deciding to play this game. But yeah, those are my main thoughts coming out of the Grand Prix. And I'd like to know yours as well. Let's get a bit of a discussion going. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I've had fun presenting this. If you enjoyed it, even if you didn't agree with me, make sure to hit like, potentially subscribe. It really helps me boost my platform on here. You can check out my other videos, for example, my review of WRC 8, which I did on Friday, which I'm really happy with, and I'm really happy with how well it's been performing, so thank you so much if you've come from that one, or you've gone off to see that one, because it really helps me out. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.